Конечно, некоторые вещи действительно условны, но ни в коем случае нельзя забывать. Человеческая жизнь священна. Ее нужно ценить, иначе нас всех ждет гибель. И что бы там ни говорили, смерть всегда плохо. В каждом живом организме на генетическом уровне заложен инстинкт самосохранения. И когда кто-то говорит «я хочу умереть», это значит «я не хочу жить, как сейчас». Другими словами, «я хочу жить хорошо». Вот и выходит, что вместо «хочу умереть» нам следует говорить «хочу жить достойно». Нельзя говорить о смерти, потому что в самом слове «жизнь» заложен приказ «оставайся живым». 논문도 그 주제로 썼지만은 한국어에서는 경어법이 굉장히 발달되어 있어서 그리고 이 성어, 이 태호 때문에 번역 작업이 많이 힘들어해요. 이거는 한국어의 매력인데 정말 러시아 독자들도 그 매력을 느낄 수 있도록 어떻게 했으면 좋겠는지 항상 늘 큰 숙제예요. 모든 사람들이 옛날부터 뭔가 이렇게 마음이 통하는 이런 작품을 번역하고 싶은데 그건 곤존센 몬실온이라는 작품이에요. 꼭 그 책을 번역하고 싶습니다. 왜냐하면 보니까 다른 언어로 많이 번역된 책인데 러시아 독자들만 그 책을 접할 수 없었습니다. 한국 문학이 굉장히 솔직합니다. 솔직하고 표현들이 가끔씩 보면 굉장히 직설적이고 이렇게 노골적으로 되어 있어서 솔직하게 작가의 의도를 볼 수 있는 이런 문학이라서 너무 좋아요. 한국 문학을 읽기보다는 음미하는 편이에요. 정말 먹음직스러운 언어로 표현된 이런 문학이기 때문에 맛과 멋이 다 있어요. 그래서 그거는 정말 군침 흘리면서 이렇게 씹는 이런 과정인 것 같아요. 정말 따뜻하고 멋지고 맛있는 문학이라고 생각해요.
Arirang TV is conducting an overseas TV viewer survey to provide you with a better global broadcast service. Share your valuable feedback on the Arirang TV website www.arirang.com or mobile application. Survey participants will be selected at random to receive special gifts. 2025 Arirang Overseas TV Viewer Survey. We look forward to hearing from you.
In our headlines on this Monday, July 21st, here in South Korea. At least 18 people have been killed and 9 others remain missing after the torrential rain nationwide, and President Lee Jin-sook has called for swift designation of affected areas as special disaster zones. And applications for the so-called consumption coupons kicked off on this Monday. All Korean citizens are eligible for these coupons, as are some non-Korean residents here in the country. Meanwhile, Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba's ruling coalition lost its majority at the upper house in a parliamentary election this past Sunday. We have more on the implications of this election result. We start with the death toll from the torrential rain here in South Korea that triggered frightening flash floods and lethal landslides. Lee Seung-jae has our top story.
18 people have been killed and 9 others are missing after heavy rain across South Korea beginning last week and subsequent flooding and landslides. The latest figures were announced by the Ministry of the Interior and Safety and the National Fire Agency on Monday, with the southern county of Sancheong seeing the largest number of victims with 10 dead and 4 missing. Firefighting officials say rescue operations are still underway there. Torrential downpours have slammed the country since Wednesday, with Sancheong receiving an accumulated 793.5 millimeters of rain as of 5 p.m. Sunday. The other deaths occurred in Osan and Gapyeong in Gyeonggi-do Province, Seosan and Dangjin, Chungcheongnam-do Province, and the southwestern city of Gwangju. Since last week, authorities have reported 1,999 cases of flooded roads, soil loss, and destroyed public facilities, with 2,238 other cases of damage to private property. Over 14,000 people have been taken to shelters across 15 major cities and provinces, while 62 flights were canceled. In response to the nationwide damage, President Lee Jae-myung on Sunday instructed the government to find ways to swiftly designate the areas that were hit hardest as special disaster zones. Areas designated as special disaster zones are entitled to government support for damage recovery and victim relief. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the South Korean army has deployed its ground forces and equipment to assist recovery efforts in rain-ravaged regions. More than 1,000 troops and over 20 pieces of heavy equipment were mobilized in Gwangju metropolitan city, Chungcheongnam-do Province and Gyeongsang-nam-do Province on this Monday. Starting last Thursday, a total of 2,500 soldiers have been deployed in areas hit hard by the torrential rain. Their current work involves clearing debris from roads and homes and organizing essential supplies. Also on the local front, applications for the so-called consumption coupons kicked off on this Monday. All Korean citizens are eligible for these coupons, as are some non-Korean residents here in the country. Chuhan reports.
Registrations for the Livelihood Recovery Consumption Coupon, the first major economic stimulus under the Lee Jae-myung administration, started from 9 a.m. Monday. The Ministry of the Interior and Safety announced that the applications will be open for approximately 8 weeks until 6 p.m. on September 12th. The coupon program provides 150,000 Korean won, roughly $108 per recipient, with higher amounts for certain groups. 300,000 won will be given to low-income households and single-parent families, and 400,000 won for recipients of the basic livelihood subsidy. Residents from areas outside of Seoul, Incheon, and Gyeonggi-do Province will receive an additional 30,000 won, while those living in one of the 84 designated rural areas at risk of depopulation will get an extra 50,000 won. People will receive coupons the day after application, and the coupons are valid until November 30th. The ministry says no coupons will be issued after the September 12th deadline, and those who don't apply will not receive any benefits. People can apply online through their bank or credit card sites or through local payment apps such as Seoul Pay Plus. They can also apply offline at their local government neighborhood office. Online registrations are available through either mobile devices or computers. To prevent system overload and congestion, the first week from Monday through Friday will follow a day-of-the-week system based on the last digit of the applicant's birth year, 1 or 6 on Monday, 2 or 7 on Tuesday, and so on. Weekend applications are only available online. Applicants can choose to receive coupons as credit debit cards, prepaid cards, or a community-based gift certificate which can only be used at registered merchants in the applicant's municipality. Coupons can only be used at small businesses with annual sales of 3 billion won or less. They are not valid at places such as large supermarkets, department stores, duty-free shops, and online malls. Foreign residents who fall under certain categories can also receive the coupons. The eligible groups are permanent residents, marriage migrants, recognized refugees, those who are listed on a resident registration document that includes at least one Korean citizen. To be eligible, they must be enrolled in the national health insurance system, either as a subscriber, dependent, or recipient. The government says the livelihood coupons should stimulate consumption and boost the local economy. Park Junan, Arirang News.
And in light of that optimistic outlook by the government, our correspondent Moon Ji-young was out in the streets of Seoul to gauge the public response to efforts to encourage consumption. Do take a listen.
Immense public interest was evident on the first day of applications for the Livelihood Recovery Consumption coupons. Older members of society were seen lining up in front of community centers to apply, while the widespread enthusiasm also led to some credit card website servers crashing. I'm here at a local market in southern Seoul. The coupons can be used at small businesses like these. Many have said that they will be using the coupons to pay for daily necessities.
Once I get this cash handout, I can definitely cut down on what I spend on food. So I think it'll really lighten the load, at least for a bit.
You see, I've got 3 kids, and honestly, their academy fees cost more than I thought they would. Since it isn't exactly cheap, I really want to put this towards my kids' education expenses.
On the small business front, owners are holding on to the hope that the consumption coupons will give the economy at least a temporary lift.
I think it'll be easier for people who might have eaten less meat because it's pricey now. We expect this to create a virtuous cycle for the entire livestock industry. And if our sales increase significantly, allowing us to pay more in taxes, I believe that would be beneficial for everyone.
I guess with these livelihood coupons, consumer spending will pick up for a little while, but it won't last long. So the market will probably only be active for a bit. And once these coupons are all used up, I'm worried the economy might drop again.
Experts expect the coupons to boost consumption. However, they also point out that they are a stimulus measure rather than an economic growth strategy.
When looking at different income levels, for high-income earners and upper-middle-income earners, the issuance of these consumption coupons is more likely to result in an increase in excess savings rather than driving additional consumption. Conversely, for lower-middle-income earners and below, we believe these consumption coupons will clearly and directly translate into consumption.
Meanwhile, the government plans to meticulously work with local governments to ensure that not a single citizen misses out on receiving them. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
In other news, the president's first cabinet is taking tangible shape with a number of his nominees confirmed, but one name withdrawn over the weekend. Our presidential office correspondent Song Yu-jin has the latest.
South Korean President Lee Jae-myung is building his first cabinet, but not without a few bumps along the way. On Sunday, President Lee withdrew his nomination of Lee Jin-sook, the former president of Chungnam National University, as education minister.
President Lee has been carefully weighing up his decision, listening to a wide range of opinions. On Saturday, he met with Kim Byung-gi, floor leader of the ruling Democratic Party, and Song Eun-sok, interim leader and floor leader of the main opposition People Power Party, to hear their views as well.
The nominee had come under fire following allegations of plagiarism in her academic work and controversy over sending her daughter abroad alone to study while still a middle school student, which is illegal under Korean law. Woo added that the government will search for a new candidate to lead the education ministry. However, the president is standing by his pick for the Minister of Gender Equality and Family, Democratic Party lawmaker Kang Seon-woo, who's also facing backlash over allegedly mistreating her aides.
After thoroughly reviewing the issues raised, Kang's explanation and opinions shared through various channels, the president has made his final decision.
President Lee has filled 7 of the 19 minister posts in his first cabinet so far. 6 new faces and 1 holdover, retaining Agriculture Minister Song Mi-ryong. More appointments could follow this week as confirmation hearings have been completed for all but the culture and land ministries. In South Korea, minister nominees must go through parliamentary confirmation hearings, though it's the president who makes the final decision. 송유진, Arirang News.
Newly appointed Foreign Minister Cho Hyun has reaffirmed the importance of the Lee Jae-myung administration's pragmatic diplomacy centered on national interests, especially in light of the rapid changes in geopolitics. Speaking at his inauguration ceremony earlier on this Monday, the top diplomat also asserted that establishing peace on the Korean Peninsula is the top priority under the current climate of uncertainty and tension. And to this end, he spoke of seeking dialogue with Pyongyang in close coordination with Washington. He also underscored the importance of seeking broader diplomatic relations with global counterparts amid the rivalry between the US and China. Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba's ruling coalition has lost its majority at the upper house in a parliamentary election this past Sunday. Our Cho Hyun covers this result and its broader implications.
Japan's ruling coalition has failed to secure a majority in the upper house. In the election on Sunday, the ruling coalition, comprised of the Liberal Democratic Party and its partner Komeito, lost its majority, gaining only 47 seats. To keep the majority, the ruling coalition parties needed to win at least 50 seats, adding to the 75 they already held. But the LDP won just 39 and Komeito got 8, falling short of the target. Currently, Japan's House of Councillors has 248 members, each serving a 6-year term. Every 3 years, half of the seats are up for election, and this year, 125 seats were voted on, including 1 vacant seat in Tokyo. As a result, the ruling camp now holds 122 seats, while the opposition claimed 126, taking over the upper house. Following last year's major defeat in the House of Representatives election, the Liberal Democratic Party has lost ground again. This is the first time since the party was founded in 1955 that the LDP-led government has failed to hold a majority in both the lower and upper houses. Taking its place is the rising Democratic Party for the People, which advocates a moderate line and gained strong support, winning 17 seats. The party earned votes with appeals to ordinary people, such as raising take-home pay and lowering insurance costs for young people. The right-leaning Sanseito won 14 seats by promoting a Japanese-first policy, including restrictions on foreign land ownership in Japan, despite criticism for discriminating against foreigners. Voter turnout was 58.52%, rising more than 6 percentage points compared to 3 years ago. Regardless of the election results, experts say bilateral cooperation between South Korea and Japan will remain positive, especially on external threats.
We need to deal with this non-conventional, new emerging threat as well. And of course, challenges from China, technologically, economically, and even politically, is not simple at all. So having had all this, conflicts and threats and challenges surrounding us, I think, again, the bilateral relationship will remain pretty much, again, the cooperative.
Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba is now expected to come under pressure to resign after the consecutive defeats. However, right after exit polls, he stated that he would fulfill his responsibility as the leader of the largest party, showing his determination to remain in office. Cho Hyun, Arirang News.
In the Middle East, dozens of Palestinians were shot dead in Gaza while seeking much-needed food aid. Our Park Hyo-bin covers this tragic event.
Last Sunday marked one of the deadliest days for Gazans seeking humanitarian aid as, according to Al Jazeera, at least 92 Palestinians were killed by Israeli gunfire across the Gaza Strip. It was one of the highest death tolls reported in a string of recent incidents where civilians were killed while trying to access food and aid. The shootings came as Israel's ongoing siege deepened Gaza's hunger crisis, with health officials reporting at least 19 deaths from starvation over the past day.
We were just going to get food for our children. We were not going to beg or fight. We just wanted to eat.
Now, Al-Shifa Hospital is full of martyrs and the wounded. The situation is catastrophic. We can no longer handle the influx of injuries, so we have started directing patients to other field hospitals.
The Israeli military acknowledged the incident, saying troops had fired warning shots to remove an immediate threat posed to the forces, but did not provide specific evidence. Hamas expressed outrage over the incident, warning that the growing humanitarian catastrophe could derail the ongoing ceasefire talks in Qatar. Meanwhile, the Israeli military has expanded its ground operations in central and northern Gaza. Residents in Dia al-Bala said Israeli planes dropped leaflets ordering evacuations and later bombed 3 homes in the area. It marks the first time such an evacuation order has been issued for the area since the war began. The city was believed to be a potential location where hostages were being held, and Israel had avoided launching attacks due to concerns Hamas might execute them. But with ceasefire talks between the two groups in Doha once again stalled, Israel now appears to be ramping up military pressure on Hamas by expanding its ground operations. Park Hyubin, Arirang News.
Back on the local front, Jeju Island's greenhouse cultivation of citrus fruits, including the mandarin, is pledging another season of sweet oranges despite the sweltering heat. Cho Hyun has details.
The mandarin orange harvest is in full swing under vinyl greenhouses on Jeju Island. The oranges are yellow-colored when daily temperature differences are large. That is why those from greenhouses mostly look green, especially in summer with lower temperature differences. Although the color is not a perfect yellow, the orange's sugar content and quality are excellent. The abnormal weather the island has experienced this year has, however, delayed the harvesting season. Production is projected to be 26,000 tons, which is 1.6% less than last year. However, the price is similar to last year, 25,000 Korean won, around $18.4 for a 3-kilogram box. The farmers expect consumers to buy more of the produce.
Since we did our best to harvest the oranges, we hope that more consumers buy them.
The sugar content of oranges from greenhouses this year is higher than usual at 10 to 12 bricks. Their high vitamin C content will help consumers overcome fatigue and maintain a healthy immune system. The National Agricultural Cooperative Federation stresses that it harvests fresh and high-quality oranges only.
We harvest fresh oranges only and ship them within 2 to 3 days. So our consumers should not worry about their quality at all.
The NACF and farmers expect consumers will enjoy more oranges from Jeju Island this summer. Cha Hyun, Arirang News.
And now, Adidang TV, South Korea's only English-language broadcasting channel, is partnering with LGU Plus to expand its global platform. Adidang TV's content will be available in North America through LG Channels, a free ad-supported streaming TV service operated by Korean mobile carrier LGU Plus. Now, this particular service, a first for Adidang TV in North America, will start on Friday, that is July 25th. As LG Channels continues to expand, Arirang hopes to make its content available in more countries. LGU Plus will use AI technology to add multilingual subtitles and dubbing to Arirang's content. The two entities will also work to expand satellite broadcasting across Latin America and Africa.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. In Vietnam, a tourist boat capsized in Halong Bay on Saturday, leading to at least 38 deaths. The Wonder Sea, carrying 53 people, mostly Vietnamese families from Hanoi, capsized around 2 p.m. local time after encountering sudden fierce winds, heavy rain, and lightning. 10 people were rescued, including a 14-year-old boy who was pulled out from the hull 4 hours after the capsize. 5 people are still missing and search and rescue efforts are still underway. The storm came on so quickly that passengers had little time to react, even though life vests were available. In the United States, 30 people were injured, 7 critically, when a vehicle drove into a crowd outside a music venue in East Hollywood, Los Angeles, in the early hours of Saturday. The driver, identified as 29-year-old Fernando Ramirez, was reportedly kicked out of the nightclub minutes before he drove his car into the crowd. Surveillance footage shows him mounting the sidewalk around 2 a.m., first hitting a taco stand, then a valet podium, and finally the waiting crowd. Ramirez was dragged from the wrecked vehicle, assaulted, and shot before being hospitalized. Authorities found no evidence indicating that the incident was linked to terrorism or driven by any criminal intentions beyond the driver's intoxicated state. Police are also searching for the man who shot Ramirez and fled the scene. On Sunday, a 7.4 magnitude earthquake struck 144 kilometers east of Russia's Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky city. The tremors triggered tsunami alerts, which were later lifted. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center and U.S. National Tsunami Center issued coastal warnings for Kamchatka, Hawaii, Guam, and American Samoa. Roughly 2 hours later, all alerts were officially downgraded and lifted. There have been no reports of casualties or structural damage, and seismic activity has subsided. Authorities warn that the Kamchatka Peninsula remains a high-risk seismic zone. Tech company Astronomer Inc.'s CEO Andy Byron resigned on Saturday after a video surfaced showing him embracing his chief people officer during a Coldplay concert. The incident took place on Wednesday when Byron and Kristen Cabot appeared on the Kiss Cam, prompting reactions from Coldplay's Chris Martin, who joked, saying either they're having an affair or they're just very shy. The footage went viral on social media platforms, drawing scrutiny for their conduct, particularly given that both are married. The company announced Byron's resignation from the CEO role, and Cabot was also reportedly suspended. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
The heat wave came back immediately after the heavy rain. From now on, you need to prepare for the steaming heat again. With heat wave warnings and advisories in effect across the country, scorching heat of around 33 degrees Celsius will continue during the day tomorrow. With high humidity, the temperatures will feel as high as nearly 36 degrees. As the atmosphere is unstable, showers have been falling across the country. There will be up to 80 millimeters of rain from showers in the Jeollado provinces and western parts of Gyeongsangnam-do province, and 5 to 60 millimeters in other areas by tonight. Tomorrow morning will start warm at 23 to 26 degrees all over the country. Daily highs move up to 31 degrees in Seoul and Busan, 32 degrees in Jeju. There will be lots of showers along the heat for the time being. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Right, those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. As always, thank you for watching.
How to survive in Korea. Workplace. Step 1. Lunchtime. The most important morning routine is to check today's menu. Food is essential for survival. Memorize today's menu. The highlight of office life. Lunchtime. Rice in the bottom left, soup in the bottom right. The top is for the sides. The sauce and the spoon go here. This is the basic layout, but it's a bit odd to switch rice and soup. When you're done, pour the leftovers into the soup bowl. It doesn't look that appetizing, so wait until others are done eating. Step 2. Neng, nep, nenep. These are the most used expressions at work. Choose the most appropriate form. Neng, nep, nenep. Remember that the formal ne can sound a bit stiff. Did you just say yes? Absolutely not acceptable. You want to find the right word for the right occasion. Step 3. Desteria. Desteria is the oasis in the desert. Show them your character. If you're not the diligent type, get a stooky plant. Work is tough. Laugh and the whole world laughs with you. Weep and you weep alone. Stay put, like the stooky that survives in the desert. Hang in there until the end. Of course, you can always quit. You matter more than anything else. Step 4. Survival kit. Every worker needs a survival kit. Survival kit level 1. This position gets the most exposure. Grab one when you need a sugar boost. Always keep a few treats you can offer your co-workers. Survival kit level 2. These are for hunger pangs before and after a meal. You'll need them when you take a coffee break with your office buddies. Survival kit level 3. Trash talking your boss with your soulmate. Did you survive in the workplace? Office romance? Be careful. Even the photocopier knows all the gossip.
Change the way you start skincare. 7 vegan peptide, maximum benefits for your skin. And amplify the effect of the next skincare step. Boosting, glowing, and brightening. Effortless care. Visible results. 7 vegan peptide booster. Mizone.
코딩을 배우고 싶어? 로보로보로 와! 로보로보와 코딩을 배워 로보로보와 사고력 키워 로보로보와 논리력 배워 코딩 처음이라면 코딩 교육 전문가와 함께 로보로보와 실력을 높여 로보로보와 목표를 이뤄 로보로보와 내 꿈을 펼쳐
미래를 준비하는 코딩 교육 전문가
Japan's ruling coalition has fallen short of securing a majority in the upper house in a crucial parliamentary election this past Sunday. So what does this mean? We tell you on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective. It's Monday, July 21st here in South Korea. I'm Min San-hee. Today we touch upon the results of a key parliamentary election in neighboring Japan and their broader implications. For this, I have Celia Ferretti with French daily Le Croix here in the studio. Celia, welcome.
Glad to be here.
I also have Walter Sim with Singaporean daily, the Straits Times over in Tokyo. Walter, it's great to have you on.
Nice to be here as well.
Right, Walter, we will start with you. Let's begin with the results of Sunday's upper house election and its political implications for the ruling coalition.
Right, I do think that the result obviously marks a rejection of establishment politics, especially among young voters of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party and its coalition partner Komeito. And this result would definitely turn up the pressure on Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. So Mr. Ishiba has insisted that he will remain in office. He said so yesterday after the exit polling results were out, and he said so again at the press conference this afternoon. And the reasoning behind it, he says, is to avoid creating a political vacuum at a time when Japan is facing many external uncertainties. This would include America's reciprocal tariffs as well as the volatile geopolitical environment. But he is also pushing this glass half full perspective that I personally don't think is very convincing, and I'm sure many in the LDP do not think is convincing either. So he's saying that despite the dismal performance, and even without this majority in both the lower and upper house of the Diet, he says that he has to remain in power because he feels responsible for the voters of the LDP, given that the party is still the largest in relative terms in the parliament. So, but despite of what he says, I think the result definitely portends political instability. It was pointed out earlier in the show that it's the first time that the LDP does not have a majority in either chamber of parliament. And yes, this also shows that the ruling coalition holds very few cards because Mr. Ishiba, just to pass legislation, he will either have to expand the ruling coalition, which is an idea that a lot of opposition parties are not on board with, or he also has to work with the opposition on an ad hoc policy by policy basis just to secure the numbers necessary to get policies passed in parliament. He also has to stand firm against calls from his rivals within the LDP itself, including his runner-up in last year's presidential election, former Economic Security Minister Sanae Takaichi, who has come out to say last week that the LDP, as it is right now, has no backbone. And so it's a kind of a norm in Japan for LDP leaders to resign after presiding over an electoral bloodbath. And so Mr. Ishiba, in standing firm, is kind of going against precedent. And so I think it really begs the question of how long his position is sustainable. But if he does stay on, and if he can withstand all these pressures, no national election is due until 2028, and the LDP is only due for a leadership election in 2027. And so if he can, withstand these pressures for the time being, I think he is set to stay.
Right. Walter, what has been the public response to the election result? I mean, was this largely expected?
Yes, I do think it's largely expected, especially given how in Japan the media has really been on top with media opinion surveys and forecasts of how the election would turn out. But I think one thing that's very interesting is the unusually high public interest in the upper house election. So according to the figures that were released just today, it shows a turnout of 58.51%, which is remarkably high for an upper house election that kind of has no direct bearing on forming the government. It also comes despite polling day being in the middle of a 3-day-long weekend. So I think this kind of shows how the public was galvanized to cast their ballots, partially because of the rise of populist parties that kind of have given voice to the bread and butter grievances of the public. And there is also a looming general unhappiness with Mr. Ishiba and his passivity, his lack of policy breakthrough since he took office last October.
Right. Keeping in mind the latest political developments in neighboring Japan, Celia, what potential policy changes, if any, in the neighboring country are likely to be closely watched by South Korea, do you think?
Well, first of all, the trade policy. We mentioned that Japan is under pressure from Washington under the Trump tariff of 25%, especially on rice and automobiles. And Tokyo has been almost wrecked in the past negotiation, gaining almost nothing out of it. If Japan ruling coalition loses its majority, ongoing trade negotiation with Washington could stall and be delayed even further. For South Korea, which compete with Japan in many export sectors, this could redefine the regional trade dynamics, giving maybe a slight advantage to Seoul if Korea managed to get a deal with Trump in any sorts. But this could also, on the other hand, hamper the idea of making a united front, a united Asian front against Trump tariff, to block any sort of cooperation between Tokyo and Seoul, to give a definite answer, a common answer to Trump on Asia. And second, it's the immigration policy. Japan has taken around 1 million foreign workers to address labor shortages due to the lack of births. And it's a problem we see in Korea too, even worse, relatively speaking. And in this election, what is really striking is the far-right party growing louder with it's called the Sanseito party, which a very blunt anti-immigration policy. South Korea would also struggle with the same problem of immigration, that will need immigration in the years to come to face these labor shortages, could be impacted right now by maybe a shift in workplace mobility. Maybe people that wanted to work in Japan might shift to Korea because they feel they're not really well welcomed anymore there. So that could be a first consequences. But later, maybe people in Korea might also start to have some problem with immigration and mimic what the Sanseito party is doing right now in Japan. But that's maybe for the 10 years later. We'll see how the situation develops. And finally, the also important takeaway from this election is the defense spending. Prime Minister Ishiba, if he maintains his power, he's expected to pursue a record high defense budget in Japan. And that would raise concern in Seoul, particularly given the historical grievance between the two countries. But also nowadays, Tokyo and Seoul are cooperating on defense matter regarding North Korea, for example. So maybe there's also room to continue this policy of working better together against a common threat that is North Korea.
Right. And speaking about the grievances between the two countries, South Korea and Japan, that is, just last week, Seoul condemned Tokyo's claim over Korea's Dokdo Islets. Now, this claim was carried in Japan's annual white paper, which also referred to South Korea as an important regional partner. Celia, do you believe that global geopolitics will perhaps help these two countries to move beyond their past conflict to perhaps a future of constructive collaboration?
Well, indeed, the Dokdo Takeshima issue remains a deeply symbolic dispute between South Korea and Japan. And in this annual defense white paper last week, it reaffirmed its claim over the islet. And that is quite usual coming from Japan, but it's what is really new this year is calling South Korea an important regional partner. That's very interesting because this contradiction highlights a broader tension. Can historical grievance coexist with present-day strategic cooperation? In today's geopolitical climate, the stakes are high. Both countries face common challenges from the threat of China, North Korea, and also the global pressure to reduce dependence on U.S. security and U.S. economy. In this context, we've seen over the past years, closer ties between Seoul and Tokyo are not just desirable, they're needed. Whether on missile defense coordination, economic security, even on technology, AI and semiconductor supply chains, both countries need to work together because just working alone, being isolated from one another, will not help them survive the competition against bigger threats like China. But for that to happen, both countries need to separate maybe symbolic disputes, historical dispute, from strategic concerns. That doesn't mean forgetting the past, but it requires, I think, some pragmatic leadership on the Dokdo issue, for example, and I'm really only talking about that, not the sexual labor or forced labor during the war. But on that, I think it's an issue that hasn't seen many progress over the decades we've been talking about this, and I think it might be required to both countries to agree to disagree. This issue will not be resolved, but let's move on to something that could help to fix other situation. And I think That's really what the two countries are trying to do now, focus on what can be improved, move on something that can be beneficial for both countries, and maybe talk about the past a bit later.
Right, which essentially, of course, it's easier said than done, though. Walter, back in neighbouring Japan, domestic concerns, including inflation and immigration, as Celio mentioned, are believed to have strongly shaped voter sentiment. First of all, how severe is inflation there?
Right. If we look at the figure by itself, inflation stood at 3.3% as of June. But I do think that figure alone tells just part of the story, especially considering how Japan has suffered from years and decades of low inflation. So we also see a lot of media reports focusing on how Japanese companies are promising the highest average wage growth in 34 years at an average of 5.25%. So those reports by themselves also paint a very over-positive picture of the Japanese economy. But what I think has not really been focused through these economic data, economic numbers, is the reality that real wages have been shrinking for 5 months and counting, and households really feel much poorer than ever before. So this issue becomes even more dire if we consider rice prices, for instance, and we know how rice is a staple for the Asian diet, especially the Japanese. And so rice prices are nearly double what they were last year. And so this has obviously had an impact on household consumption. So I think with this in mind, economic crisis, the cost of living crisis, was really one major element, as you pointed out, behind the election. And this has kind of fueled an element of populism as well. So the ruling coalition were promising voters this vague through this vague campaign pledge that they were going to give cash handouts of 20,000 yen per voter, whilst the opposition was promising sweeping consumption tax cuts of varying degrees. And of course, this would be detrimental to Japan in the long run if we think about issues such as its fiscal health and the impact on big picture, big ticket expenditures such as social welfare, defense, or education.
Right. What I'd also like to touch upon something that Celio mentioned earlier. Could you explain the anti-foreigner sentiment there in the US? I mean, I understand there are scholars in Japan who have shared concerns about growing xenophobia in Japan.
Right. I kind of think that it's kind of related to the cost of living crisis that I talked about earlier. And I kind of think that this sentiment probably wouldn't have been so acute if household consumption sentiment was more robust. But it's kind of the ruling government's failure to fully address these concerns, and coupled with its kind of old school way of campaigning that focused on street campaign rallies at the expense of devoting more resources on social media, that has given far-right upstart parties. Celio mentioned Sanseito, which has been very online savvy and very adept at using social media to draw the attention of young voters and galvanize their support. So I think that were pretty much the factors behind Sanseito's meteoric rise as a political party. It grew from just one seat that was contested to 14 seats in the upper house out of 55 candidates that were fielded. And I think that was a pretty high success rate. And Sanseito kind of campaigned on this Japanese first campaign slogan. And it was spewing claims that, Japan was becoming and I quote, economic colony. Japan was suffering from a silent invasion of foreigners. And this kind of plays to the gallery when voters are feeling worse off than before, when many Japanese citizens are taught from young that the country is homogeneous, and when, the passport rate, the percentage of Japanese that holds passport is at a low 17%. So it's pretty much an inward-looking country, and we have foreigners coming in, snapping up real estate, and Japan is also facing a serious over-tourism problem due to the weak yen, and voters, as they scream and save, they just have to look around and see an influx of foreign tourists spending lavishly, going for expensive meals. So it kind of, hammers home the harsh reality for them and kind of gives Sanseito the space to drive such anti-foreign sentiment. So all this kind of feeds into the impression, and I think it is a cautionary tale that, regional governments might want to heed and kind of preventing this anti-foreign sentiment from taking root before it before it erupts like it has in Japan. So the LDP has been put on the back foot. And last week, in a bid to curb Sunseto's momentum, it kind of launched this so-called cross-agency control tower to deal with foreigner-related issues, even though, not much details have been provided as to what its actual mandate is.
Right. And speaking about the presence of foreigners within the community here in this part of the world, as you mentioned earlier, Celia, immigration is also being proposed as one possible option to addressing South Korea's own population crisis. That being said, the UPI recently published an article based on findings by a research entity here in the country. It claims that we will witness a frightening fall with regard to our population over the next 100 years. Could you tell us a bit about that particular coverage?
Exactly. The numbers are staggering. According to a recent study by the Korean Peninsula Population Institute, South Korea population could shrink to just 7.5 million by the next century. That's less than 15% of today's population. Even the median projection put the number at only around 11 million. And the trend is accelerating by South Korea being the country with the lowest birth rate in the world, which currently sits at around 0.7 children per woman. Now, we have to be careful with projection. They're not totally reliable, but it gives an idea, a trend of where we're going. And the demographic freefall poses a serious threat to the nation's economic future, the labor force and welfare system, especially with an aging population. By the next century, there could be 140 seniors for every 100 working age Korean. So that's dramatically shifting the dependency ratio between the two populations. So what is the solution? As we mentioned, immigration is on the table currently in more and more debates, in political debate. Well, traditionally, immigration is not very common in Korea. It's really a recent phenomenon. Korea now doesn't feel it no longer have the choice. If they want to replace the labor shortages, the working population, they will have to require from foreign workers to support the pension system and bring in also younger demographic and new families that maybe will have babies here in Korea. But immigration itself won't solve the crisis. It must come with social integration, labor policies to integrate better the immigration. And coming back from Japan, we see also that now there's a lot of tension, xenophobia against immigration, and societies, Korean and Japanese societies are quite similar in how they are recently having immigrants. The country is not really used to it, so it brings tension. And the consequences of that is like this far-right party are pushing now for anti-immigration laws. That is, in the case of Japan, with a low population and shrinking population, is shooting yourself in the foot because you will need people anyway. That's how the economy is going to survive if you don't make more babies. So immigration is not a silver bullet. It will not solve anything, but it's something to consider and to consider wisely to better integrate and make sure it can be sustainable in the country, integrate the immigrants and make the country sustainable and keep the economy growing.
Right, for sure. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the figure you gave me. So 100 years from now, the population here in the country is going to be about 7 million people. But of course, we have to be very careful about such projections. Walter, one question to you. With regard to Japan's tariff talks with the Trump administration, where is that standing as we talk?
Well, there really isn't much to note. I was hoping to give positive news on this front, but no, there really isn't much to note other than the fact that Economic Revitalization Minister Ryoshi Akazawa, who is Mr. Ishiba's chief trade negotiator, has departed for his 8th visit to Washington earlier today for the 8th round of ministerial talks. So it was notable that on the campaign trail, Mr. Ishiba really hardened his rhetoric against the US. He was saying things that Japan should not be taken for fools, Japan should not be underestimated. But now that the election is done and dusted, it is still kind of unclear as to whether Mr. Ishiba will back down and offer concessions now. But To be honest, I do think that that looks pretty much unlikely, especially when Mr. Trump wants concessions on autos and rice, as Silo mentioned earlier. And these are pretty much sacred cows for Japan, and that kind of gives Mr. Ishiba very little room to maneuver without upsetting traditional lobby groups. And so I think at this point, it still looks exceptionally unlikely that Japan will manage to win any reprieve or respite from the 25% reciprocal tariff from August 1st, unless, of course, Mr. Akazawa pulls off a miracle on this current trip.
Right. And Celia, what has been the impact of Mr. Trump's trade protectionism, if you will, on perhaps the regional debate over globalism versus nationalism, do you think?
Well, I think Donald Trump return to a hardline protectionism has sent shockwaves across Asia, reigniting tension between economic nationalism and global integration. Since taking office, he reimposed tariff, as we talked a lot here in Korea and in Japan. And this America First approach is clearly pushing Asian economies to become more self-reliant, but not in an isolationist way. Instead, we're seeing what analysts call a strategic decoupling. Countries like South Korea and Japan are trying to reduce their dependency on U.S. economy, sending less exports to U.S. and maybe reactivate local partnership in Asia or looking for new partnership in Europe, in Africa. So it's a sort of shifting your strategy to other countries to be less a victim of Trump policy. In Japan, the recent election reignited this debate. So we've seen that Prime Minister Ishiba is under pressure, still negotiating tariffs with Trump. Same case here. President Lee Jae-myung is still negotiating, and we'll hope to see maybe a deal before August 1st for both countries. So this trend of should we go like more protectionist or keep going global? I think for now, the idea of a global world interconnected is still going strong. The US tried to impose this new world order of being sort of bargaining always and making deals one-to-one. But still now Korea and Japan and Asian countries are looking to better connect with other regions, being less dependent on the US. We'll see how far that can work, if it can work. But that will require a lot of negotiation with a lot of partners in the world.
Right, for sure. But we'll see some picture, I suppose, by August 1st then. All right, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Celia, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts. Walter, over in Tokyo, thank you so much for your insights today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Right, well, that is all the time we have for this edition of Press Perspective. We return same time tomorrow with a panel session on a number of national events here in South Korea. Do join us then.